There's going to be lots of time for you three to get stuck into each other, hopefully. But before we do that, I just need to introduce our other two guests joining us remotely. Two serving members of Parliament, one only just, the other comfortably. Joining us, the member for Higgins out of Melbourne, Kelly O'Dwyer. Welcome to the program, representing the Liberal Party, of course.
Great to be with you, Peter.
You don't have to sound quite so enthused, but thanks for your company. And Nick Champion, Labor member for Wakefield, got through by the skin of his teeth at the election on Saturday night. Congratulations and welcome to the program.
Well, thanks for that endorsement, Peter.
All right.
Really happy about that.
Nick, I'm just going to start with you. Something that is, being more serious for a moment. One by one, since the election has been declared, we have seen members of your team, your caucus in the Parliament, senior members in particular of the leadership group, I suppose, make it very clear that Tony Abbott will not get his way. Our plan is to take him on and block him in his attempts to repeal the carbon tax. Now, this is something that is going to go to Labor caucus when it next meets, presumably early next week. Do you agree with that strategy?
Well, I think at this point in time, people are expressing personal opinions because we haven't had a caucus meeting. We haven't looked at our policy in opposition.
A rare moment in the Labor Party where you can express your opinion. So, please, what do you think?
Indeed. Look, the view I have is that basically carbon pricing is only sustainable as a policy when you have bipartisan consensus on it. That was the position with Howard, it was a position with Turnbull, and there was relatively little fuss with it. But the moment Tony Abbott decided to oppose it, decided to politicise it, it made carbon pricing practically impossible. And the view I hold is that ultimately Abbott will get what he wants. He will axe the carbon pricing system, and he'll do so by buying off a range of minor parties in the Senate. Now, given that's the fact, I believe that Labor should oppose any changes in the House, but that we should abstain in the Senate, and in essence allow the Liberal Party to implement their policy. And well, you know that...
So hang on, can I just ask you about that? Sorry to interrupt, Nick, but you're of the view that you should allow the Abbott government to pass its repealing of the carbon tax in the lower house, and that you should abstain in the Senate, which effectively means allow them to pass it.
Well, I think we have got a right to oppose it in the House of Representatives, but I don't think we've got a right to frustrate the government's mandate, and I certainly don't think it's a very good look to be voting with the Greens again. I think we should abstain in the Senate, allow the Abbott government to implement its policies in their entirety in terms of carbon. That is direct action and the repeal of the carbon price. And that would basically make him responsible for climate policy in Australia. And I think if he was allowed to implement his policy in its totality, the following things would happen. Emissions would go up.
Before you say that, though, Nick Champion, do you accept... Well, no, I'll let you get to that, but do you accept that what you're saying is quite different to what some very senior colleagues of yours are saying they would like to see the caucus do?
Well, Peter, it's very different, but, that's the nature of the debate. Look, I think what would happen is if Abbott is allowed to put his rather foolish policy into place, the following things would happen. Emissions would go up, electricity prices would go up, we would not meet our 5% target. Basically, we would see $3 billion wasted on direct action, and his policy would be exposed as a farce, as wishful thinking, and it would soon be labelled a pretty big disaster.
All right, let me bring...
In essence, I think if the Liberal Party want to hang itself with a bad policy, I think we should give them all the rope they need.
Well, let me bring Kelly O'Dwyer in now. You're obviously not going to agree with Nick Champion in the latter part there, that you're going to hang yourself with all the rope that you need on your climate change policy. Or maybe you do. Maybe you're one of these people in the Liberal Party that thinks direct action is a joke. But put that to one side. It must be music to your ears to hear him basically suggesting that you can get your way by repealing the carbon tax, because if the Labor Party is to follow that advice and abstain from any view in the Senate, then you will get your way and the carbon tax will be a thing of the past.
Well, amongst all of that diatribe that we just heard from Nick there was a kernel of common sense, and that was that the Labor Party should listen to the Australian people, and the Australian people have spoken very clearly. They have given a very clear mandate to the Coalition Party to get rid of the carbon tax, to get rid of a carbon tax that was imposed upon them without their will, imposed upon them in a great big lie by Julia Gillard when she said she wouldn't do it but did anyway. And he's basically saying that, you know, the leadership of the Labor Party is wrong, that the mandate shouldn't be frustrated. He is speaking common sense and saying that it should be passed in the Senate, in the House of Reps, ultimately as well, I think, Nick. And finally, we're hearing somebody on the Labor Party side actually say we shouldn't be so arrogant as to dismiss the mandate that's been given to the Coalition Party at this election.
Nick Champion, does that give you pause for thought, that kind of ringing endorsement from Kelly O'Dwyer?
Well, not really, because I think Tony Abbott's policy and the Liberals' policy would be exposed as a complete fraud and wishful thinking. And $3 billion wasted, that's what we'll see. We'll see electricity prices rise. We'll see emissions rise. That would be a policy disaster. And I don't think, as I said before, if the Liberal Party want to hang themselves with bad policy, who are we to stand in their way? That, I think, in time would... that sort of policy disaster would actually spell the end of the sort of wishful thinking that's gone on in the Liberal Party for so long, and mean that they probably, in time, would move back to a position of carbon pricing.
Nick Champion, can I just interrupt and ask you, have you spoken to any other colleagues that feel the same way as you before coming on the program?
Well, look, it wouldn't. I guess it wouldn't be polite of me to reveal discussions I've had with my colleagues.
Well, I'm not asking you to name names, but is it fair to say that there are colleagues that agree?
Name names.
It doesn't matter whether I name names or not.
Kelly O'Dwyer.
We're not going to sort of engage in that. We're going to have a caucus debate. I'm expressing my views to you because I think it's important to express those views. They are a contrary opinion. But they're a little different to Paul Keating's policy position in 1992, where he said, if you vote for a GST, you'll get one. The Labor Party would pass the GST through the Senate. I think if people vote for bad policy, then they should have the experience of it. And that's the only thing that would return us to a bipartisan position on carbon pricing, which is the only real policy, I think, in the longer term that brings down emissions. But it's simply politically unsustainable while the Liberal Party and the Greens, for that matter, decide to play politics with it.
All right, let's move on to another issue, Kelly O'Dwyer. I want to ask you about what may or may not be small-mindedness and pettiness. The decision to withdraw Steve Brax's right to go as Consul General to New York. Now, it'll inevitably be popular in voterland because people don't like diplomatic appointments of politicians at the best of times, but it is petty, isn't it? And it's also a difficult thing for him and his family. He had given up board positions, work positions. He'd planned to have his house rented out, if not already sign away that rental. The kids were excited. They were off. It was all a done deal. And now the Liberal Party are turning around and saying within a week of him leaving, bad luck, buddy, you're stuffed.
Yeah, well, look, let's go back a couple of months. In May, when this breathtaking announcement was made, with no consultation whatsoever with the coalition, in an election year for an appointment date that was to start after the federal election, we made it very clear that we were not going to give a rubber stamp to the announcement. In fact, we said it was entirely arrogant of the government to make an announcement, to make an appointment without due process and due consultation. He was put on notice at that point. He's clearly made decisions based on a hope, a vain hope indeed, that the Labor Party would be re-elected. And unfortunately for him, that hasn't happened. So,
in fairness, he's had to do something. He said yes to the appointment. 5 months have passed. He's within weeks of going there. It's pretty understandable, isn't it, that he would take a view that this thing, whatever the opposition's gripes about it, that it was so far through the process that how could you expect him to do anything other than be ready to go?
But it wasn't through the process. no consultation had occurred with the coalition.
But they were the government.
Had put him on notice. We had put him on notice. Well, but for an appointment date after the federal election. I mean, the Labor Party are so arrogant to think that they can tie up appointments after the election period. This is the reason why they were actually voted out. It's this breathtaking arrogance as to why it is that the Australian people said, we are sick of this, we have had enough. They are so internally focused, so focused on themselves, on power, on actually making appointments for their friends, former Labor premiers. They seem to have a particular penchant for former Labor premiers, that the Australian people quite rightly shrug their shoulders and say, really, are they for real?
All right, hold that thought, Kelly O'Dwyer. Stay with us as well, Nick Champion. We're going to take a commercial break. When we come back, we'll bring the panel in on this discussion as well as wider issues in the mix. You're watching Showdown.
Performance is typically defined by technical statistics. Power, acceleration, speed. But at Infinity, we don't think it's so black and white. Because when you allow human emotion to drive design, you get technology that anticipates your needs, putting you in complete control and making you feel more connected to the car. This is inspired performance. This is Infinity.
There's a hotel. There's a big one. A small one. They've got bars, room service, folded toilet paper, and little soaps. Hotels are the business. Our business. What a name. Nailed it. With that name, you'd expect us to have a few. And we do. 220,000 of them in over 85 countries. And a price match guarantee. So if you find your hotel cheaper, we'll refund the difference. That's a bee's knees. Do bees even have knees? Don't ask us. We just do hotels.com.
Welcome to comparethemeerkat.com.au IT department. People still overload my website looking for cheap health insurance for comparethemarket.com.au. Sergey have nervous meltdown. He already have worms. So now we fix problem with new computer, my bob. 3, 2, 1. We are liftoff. Comparethemeerkat.com.au. Comparethemarket.com.au. Simple.
Now, Eubank's home loan isn't just award-winning, it's reward-winning. Get $500 when you refinance with our variable rate U Home Loan. Apply today, because at Eubank, the rewards are real.
Suzuki's 1,000 Cars 10-day sale is counting down with great offers like $1,000 off selected vehicles. Get Swift with 7 airbags and Bluetooth hands-free with audio streaming from just $14,990 drive away. That's our lowest Swift price ever. And get the spacious Grand Vitara from just $24,990 drive away. That's $1,000 off. Plus, all new Suzukis come with 5-year cap price service. But hurry, offers are limited and stock is counting down fast. Suzuki's 1,000 Cars 10-day sale at your Suzuki dealer now.
Life is a journey in which we're all travelers. Looking to make that great trip with someone. Journeys are made by the people you travel with.
You saw it live on Sky News.
Live pictures. We have 4 emergency warnings.
An unfolding situation. 6 different fires.
Big pall of smoke coming in.
Breaking news.
Yes, I got it. 4 firefighters have been injured. Burns and smoke inhalation. Authorities are now worried about...
As it happens.
More than 100 firefighters in that area.
There's nothing they can do to help us.
Wherever it happens.
Burning intensely.
Sky News, Australia's news channel.
Rolling coverage of this bushfire emergency.
Welcome back. You are watching Showdown, where Kelly O'Dwyer out of Melbourne and Nick Champion out of Adelaide are staying with us. But I want to bring in the panel now and talk to Hugh McDermott, Kate Fairman, as well as Ross Cameron. Now, Kate, I'm interested in your reaction to what Nick Champion had to say. The essence of what he had to say was simply that the Labor Party should vote with the coalition in the lower house and abstain in the upper house, which effectively means let Tony Abbott repeal the carbon tax. What are the Greens going to think of that?
Well, abstaining's ridiculous. People aren't in Parliament to abstain, and I don't think people voted for Labor or the Greens for them to abstain on the carbon price. This is just being discussed today, where we've just heard that the conditions today have been record-breaking again. Here in Sydney, we've got crazy bushfires everywhere, and the reports are saying that today's weather has broken all records again.
You're not saying that's climate change, are you?
No one's saying it's climate change, but it is climate change. The Earth is warming, and so what we're getting is Labor, some members of Labor, unfortunately, or one, who knows whether it's more than one, going in and now suddenly folding. And there's a lot of people in the community who still don't want that. The Tony Abbott government, Tony Abbott, has to recognise that it's not just the House of Representatives, that he does have a Senate.
Sure, but you know Tony Abbott's, he's done on this. He's repealing the carbon tax. It's about whether he can get it through the Parliament. And by the looks of it, if Nick Champion gets his way in the view of the Labor caucus, they will let him get it through the Parliament. Now,
I don't think Nick Champion will.
Well, what do you think, Hugh McDermott? You're a card-carrying member of the Labor Party.
Proudly,
do you agree with Nick Champion? He's on the same general faction that you are.
I think even if the Labor basically opposes it, it's going to get through the lower house anyway because the Liberals have the numbers.
Sure, but he wants your party to abstain in the Senate.
The carbon tax, as the President's form, was going to be repealed anyway if the Rudd government had it won, and the new system was going to be put in. So, it's hard to say. I'm surprised that Nick says that. That's the first I've heard of that. But obviously the discussions are going on now.
But having heard it, what do you think personally?
Well, I would, if they're going to repeal the carbon tax, then the reality is that there still has to be a price on carbon. We still have to dealing with climate change, and to deny that is just foolishness.
But that can be your policy. Sorry, I've just got to ask you though, Hugh, because your policy can be to let Tony Abbott get his policy now that he's in government, but stick to your want to go to a floating price without defending the existing carbon tax, which Abbott wants to repeal. Do you agree with that?
Well,
that seems to be what Nick Champion is arguing.
Well, that's pretty much what I was in a roundabout way trying to say. I mean, the thing is that whatever Abbott's policy will be when the time comes, I think that really has to be analysed and then decide what we're going to do with it. Now, he can say that he's going to oppose and get rid of the carbon tax, the first thing he's going to do. Well, we'll see what's the first thing he's going to do. Certainly the first action was, as you said before, was to sack Brax from the position in New York, which is typical of a nasty government, a nasty Liberal Party,
but we are
as Pearl Keating used to call them.
We are going to get to that, Hugh, but let me bring you in, Ross Cameron. I've got to ask you, is this the sort of cracks in the dam on the Labor side of the Parliament, what Nick Champion said, and the Daily Telegraph have said that Hugh McDermott's one of the key Labor power brokers in New South Wales.
News to me.
He seems to be agreeing with what Nick Champion is saying, to some extent at least anyway. Are these the sort of cracks in the dam that the Liberals are looking for to be able to remove the carbon tax?
Well, I think this carbon tax, despite Kate Fairman's level of sort of religious attachment to it, has been an incredibly politically expensive policy, in the sense that it was carbon that destroyed Kevin Rudd Mark I. Carbon essentially destroyed Brendan Nelson and also Malcolm Turnbull.
But are you surprised to hear that someone like Nick Champion, member of the caucus, re-elected, is advocating that they effectively let Tony Abbott have his way in repealing the carbon tax?
I suspect you've got a Labor Party right now, despite the apparently euphoric concession speech delivered by Kevin Rudd, who I think, as Annabelle Crabb pointed out, if you had the sound turned down and you watched the two leaders' speeches on election night, you would have thought that Kevin Rudd had won in a landslide. But having said that, I think you're going to find that Labor are now bruised in a process of rebuilding. I think the nerves are raw amongst everyone else except Kevin Rudd. There's grieving and mourning going on for lost colleagues who have fallen in action. I mean, somebody like Tasmania, where the Greens have suffered the biggest swing against them. The Greens have been not decimated, which is 1/10. The Greens have been cut in half.
Well, let me ask Kate Fairman about that. I mean,
Kate must say, Christine
Tasmania was a pretty surprising result for the Greens.
But we still have gained numbers in the Senate, and we re-elected Adam Band. So we have come back stronger.
That's true, but that's more through the circumstances of good fortune than the overall result. Now, sometimes the overall result for the Greens hasn't been reflected in seats, so it swings and roundabouts, I guess. But it's Tasmania that really surprised me on the night. Covering the election, seeing the numbers come in your real heartland of Tasmania was a real repudiation, I thought, of the state Greens relationship and dynamic being reflected in the national results.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's a discussion that everybody's having in relation to our closeness with Labor governments over the past 3 years, and I think we've seen the backlash against Labor for a lot of different reasons at the federal level, and perhaps that's also what's happening in Tasmania to some extent, that we are closer in Tasmania. Of course, we have a minister in Tasmania. We have got much more of an agreement with the Labor government there than we did with the Gillard government.
Are you saying that the Greens have finally been held to account in an accountability sense for implementation rather than for, you know, don't get me wrong, as a commentator, I'm no better on this than the cheap seats observations without actually the responsibility?
No, I don't think it's the being held to account. We've got to remember the last election we polled, I think, a historic high for any minor party since the Second World War. I think the statistic was. This election, you know, I think given how many micro parties were out there, given the Clive Palmer comes out with millions of dollars in advertising,
You wouldn't think
which
he'd
we
be stealing
don't have.
votes from the left, surely?
I think I don't know where he was stealing votes from, to be honest. I think some of that is from Labor as well. Look, one area that we didn't do very well at all was in Western Sydney. We suffered quite a swing there, which is interesting. I thought we were actually gaining ground there. We were doing quite well. We did well here in New South Wales in different parts of the country. We did well on the North Coast. We did well in Cowper. We did well in some regional areas. We did well on some of the North Shore areas. But in Western Sydney, we suffered a swing.
Well,
so that, I think, is the News Limited, potentially, and our relationship with Labor and the carbon price. But, you know, we are also wanting to see why we did that, why voters turned away from us, and we're very keen to have those conversations.
All right, I'll come to you in a moment, Ross Cameron, because there's a few things I want to ask you at the same time as asking Kelly O'Dwyer, who's joining us out of Melbourne. But before going there, Hugh McDermott, quick question about Western Sydney. Now, Liberals are telling me that they were never in the hunt in some of these seats that Labor have been trying to spin we're in trouble.
So you're talking about revision of history.
They've been arguing that the seat of McMahon, where you were working, was never in play, that other seats like Tony Burke's was never in play, and this is Labor preparing to win the history wars. And one of the arguments that's cited, and then I'm going to give you a chance to respond, one of the arguments that's cited is that the 1996 landslide result for John Howard saw them win 2 less seats than they now hold in Western Sydney. Your response?
All those seats were in play. When Julia Gillard was there, they definitely were. And we were looking at an absolute wipeout in Western Sydney. Now, it changed when Rudd came in. But, for example, in McMahon, we were still close to 15 points behind.
15 points behind.
10 to 15 points in our polling. So we had to come a long way, over 20 points. Now, we ended up winning that seat by close to 7 points.
Would you let me see that polling so I can have a look over it?
Sure. What is amazing is the fact that in Western Sydney we had swings to Labor in a number of seats, and a lot of the polling booths, we won so many throughout so many parts of Western Sydney, which we did not expect to do. We really thought that we would be doing 50-50 in McMahon, and we'd be fighting tooth and nail for every single vote on election night. Now that didn't happen. So, you know, the Liberals put a lot of money into Western Sydney, obviously probably more in Penrith than other places, but they put a lot of money throughout the place, and the candidates...
Well, they actually didn't get up by that much in Lindsay. I was surprised by Lindsay, Ross Cameron, just quickly to you. I mean, it ended up being something like 53, 54 to 46, 47. I thought that the Liberals in Lindsay would get over 60% of the two-party vote.
Well, it's, I mean, I would, if I was in Lindsay, I'd take 54, you know, 7 days
Jackie
a week.
Kelly used to do better than that.
But, I mean, my very best ever result in Parramatta was 53%, a bare pass.
Yeah, but Jackie Kelly did much better than you did in Parramatta in Lindsay.
Well, look, I'm very happy for Labor to regard this as a good result for their party across Sydney. I think one of Labor's great challenges has been an apparent inability to deal with the realities they face. And if Labor regard the worst Labor result in 100 years as a good result, then I would like to see a bad one. But having said that, I mean, we are now going to hold Reid. We've won Banks. We are probably going to win Barton. 3 seats we have never held before. John Howard couldn't win them in '96 on a Howard landslide. If this is a good result for Labor, I'd like to see a bad one.
We've got to go to a commercial break.
We're going to get one of those.
Gentlemen, hang on. Hold that
still in
thought.
play.
We've got to go to a commercial break. But just before we do, I want to bring Kelly O'Dwyer in for a quick question that I'm sure she's been dying to answer ever since the stunning election victory on Saturday night. Kelly O'Dwyer, are you looking forward to being able to get right into the task of implementing the paid parental leave scheme that Tony Abbott is so passionate about?
We're all looking forward to working hard in a coalition government, Peter.
But that particular policy, I mean, that must be one, you know, that you and some of your colleagues, particularly, you know, yourself and others that write that column in the Financial Review reflecting on the tradition of economic liberalism in the Liberal Party with the Dries and the modest members, you must be rapt to be doing everything you can to get that policy as well implemented as it's been designed so far.
Well, look, as we said, we're not like the Labor Party. We don't have brain snap moments. We properly implement our policies, and we've got 2 years to properly implement this policy, a policy that is designed to increase participation in the workplace.
Does that mean you want to make changes? By the sounds of it, you need time for change.
No, I'm saying that we're going to take, oh no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we're going to take a very strong, methodical approach, not only to this policy, but to all of the policies that we're implementing. We're not going to be like Labor that brought us the pink bats in roofs that saw not only homes burnt down, but lives destroyed. We're going to take a very responsible path in government, and that's something that we promised to do in opposition. That's something we'll deliver on over the next 3 years.
All right, hold that thought. We're going to take another commercial break. Sorry for not bringing you in on that segment, Nick Champion. Stay with us. Hugh McDermott, I tell you what, just as an aside as we go to a break, a lot of fans on Twitter for you.
Love them.
A lot of fans. Make sure you don't miss the hashtag Showdown at the end of the show. No thoughts. We'll talk about it during the break. Back in a moment.
Performance is typically defined by technical statistics. Power, acceleration, speed. But at Infinity, we don't think it's so black and white. Because when you allow human emotion to drive design, you get technology that anticipates your needs, putting you in complete control and making you feel more connected to the car. This is inspired performance. This is Infinity.
At Hungry Jack's, not only do you get 5 nuggets for just $2, there are also lots of delicious sauces to play with. Take your pick. Hungry Jack's nuggets just $2. The burgers are better at Hungry Jack's.
Hello, is it me you're looking for? I can see it in your eyes, I can see it in your smile. You're all I've ever wanted.
To target eczema, you need to rebuild your damaged skin barrier, not just ease the symptoms. Introducing Cetaphil Restoraderm. Eczema-prone skin needs gentle cleansing and intense hydration. Cetaphil Restoraderm body wash gently cleanses your skin without irritation. Cetaphil Restoraderm moisturiser provides intense hydration, rebuilding the protective barrier and improving moisture levels. Rebuild your damaged skin barrier today with Cetaphil Restoraderm. This has been Medifax for Cetaphil.
All new Holden Malibu, your mid-size escape.
Life is a journey in which we're all travelers. Looking to make that great trip with someone. journeys are made by the people you travel with.
You saw it live on Sky News.
Live pictures. We have 4 emergency warnings.
An unfolding situation. 6 different fires.
Big pall of smoke coming in.
Breaking news.
4 firefighters have been injured, burns and smoke inhalation. Authorities are now worried about...
As it happens.
More than 100 firefighters in that area.
There's nothing they can do to help us.
Wherever it happens.
Burning intensely.
Sky News, Australia's news channel.
Rolling coverage of this bushfire emergency.
Welcome back. You're watching Showdown. I'm going to speak to Nick Champion now out of Adelaide after shafting him in segment 2 of the program. Let me ask you a bit of a Dorothy Dixer just to start. What on earth went so wrong for the Labor Party? You guys got absolutely smashed at the election. There's all these attempts to argue that it was a good result, but it was almost as bad as the 1996 wipeout in terms of the number of seats you've held.
Well, I wouldn't describe it as a good result, and of course we'll do our post-mortems and the like. Look, I think division was probably the greatest problem that the government had. It was certainly the one that our opponents focused in on the most, and I think we were beaten by a pretty low quality opposition with pretty low quality policies. And I think...
So do you think you can come back in one term, or is it a 2-term strategy from here?
Well, look, I think if we do what I say, and while opposing in the House the government's policies, but abstaining in the Senate on certain policies, I think if we pick our ground, let them pass their ridiculous carbon policies, let them pass their ridiculous parental leave policies, let these very unpopular, not very well thought out plans become policy reality, and then let's see how they go. My guess is that people like Kelly and many other Liberals who campaigned on the cost of living and things like that won't be nearly so smug when they have to explain rising emissions, rising electricity prices and a paid parental leave that gives $75,000
just very quickly though, you're not going to be competitive without a good leader. Who's the person you would like to see leading the Labor Party? Your opinion?
Well, look, it's pointless giving opinions at the moment because we
Come
don't
on,
have
Nick,
a choice,
step up, mate.
choice yet.
Make a call
well,
for
look,
us.
we don't yet.
This is what you're paid for. Make a decision.
Oh, come on now, come on
You've
now.
got one in the field.
Just take it easy, take it easy. I think I've made enough news tonight.
Yeah.
Look,
I think you should run, Nick. I think you should run.
Put your hand up.
I'd vote for you with that suggestion. I think that for what it's worth, I think that you're going to save the party from annihilation, whatever you think of the issue. Because Kate, this is a time to bring Kate in because the issue for Labor is
all
that
very flattering.
Well, the issue for you for Labor, which isn't a problem for the Greens, is that if they try to block this and end up in a double dissolution election within the next 12 months, they probably walk out with a worse seat showing than what they did at this election. So it's raw politics for them, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's very disappointing that this is where we've got to, and that usually you should be able to have political parties standing very firm on their principles and values and not wavering, but and on something that is just, really, as Kevin Rudd said so long ago now, it seems, the greatest moral challenge of our time. And I we can sit here and discuss what Labor.
But you're talking from a Greens perspective, but from a Labor perspective, they want to maintain their positioning.
Well, they've got a lot of supporters
Peter,
who don't want them to back down on climate change, actually. It's not like we've got 85 or 90% of the country that doesn't believe in climate change and doesn't want action on climate change. Labor actually has a significant
action on climate change is falling like Kevin Rudd in the last 3 weeks.
What do you mean it's falling like Kevin Rudd? Are you talking globally?
You mean nobody wants it?
I'm saying the number of people who rate action on climate change as their number one issue.
No.
Okay,
but that doesn't mean there's not an environmental issue, does it?
5% of Australians. Okay, so the political, I'm not talking about the substance of the issue, I'm talking about the political trajectory. It's a losing stock.
All right, Nick Champion, let me bring you back in. You wanted to respond.
Whatever the cause of it is,
sorry guys,
just
one sec. Nick Champion, you wanted to respond to what Kate Fairman was saying?
Yeah, look, I'm not talking about not responding to climate change. I believe we should respond to climate change. I think a market mechanism is probably the most effective. But we also have to respect the will of the Australian people. And if they've decided to implement bad policy through the Liberal Party, then we have to let that policy experiment occur. And that's the surest way of getting back to a bipartisan position where basically the Liberal Party agrees with carbon pricing. In the meantime, there's plenty we can do on climate change in terms of regulation and the like, which I think would be better understood and better accepted by the Australian people. I'm not talking about not responding to climate change.
Okay.
I'm just simply talking about not frustrating the will of the Australian people. Let them implement bad policy and let's see what happens.
All right, Kelly O'Dwyer, let me bring you in on a separate issue. Now, Tony Abbott is going to have to select his front bench in the coming days. He's obviously waiting to see some seats results. Your name has been speculated on, amongst others, I think, by Ross Cameron in an article that I wrote yesterday, as somebody who might be in the mix. What is your view on the makeup of that lineup? And in particular, I'm interested in what you think of some of the second stringers from the Howard era that could well be first stringers during the lifetime of the Abbott government. Someone like Bronwyn Bishop, who John Howard thought was worthy of dumping from the outer ministry twice, is going to move into cabinet under Tony Abbott. Is that one of the sort of stellar appointments that will keep the government on track?
Well, look, I have great admiration for Bronwyn Bishop. She is one of the best retail politicians going around, and I've been very fortunate to have had Bronwyn in my electorate over the past 3.5 years. So I always welcome Bronwyn in my electorate anytime because she is so good at what she does. Look, your broader point is, do we in the Liberal Party have a very deep talent pool? The answer to that, of course, is very much a yes. And that is a great problem to have. The Labor Party, by contrast, has a talent puddle. It's not terribly deep at all. And I'd have to say, you know, all joking aside, Nick, I really do think you should throw your hat into the ring for the leadership because I reckon you make a lot more sense than a lot of other people who would purport to be Labor leader.
All right.
That's a kiss of death, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say there's some kisses of death all over the place here. I'm going to let you guys go, Nick Champion and Kelly O'Dwyer. We'll talk about you, don't worry, behind your back. But thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Showdown. We appreciate both of your company.
Terrific.
Cheers, mate.
Great to be with you.
All right, but with the panel.